Hello believers, and welcome to the show. This is a podcast where we speak to creative folk about what goes on in their minds and what they do and what they think about 90s TV. I'm currently lost in the department store and bombarded by suggestions of things to buy. So many things here to improve my life, and I'm very susceptible to it. It reminds me of the time that Noddy used to come on the TV and I'd have to get in a giant glove. It's an outdated reference to a Derek and Clive sketch there, which I'm sure our guest today will appreciate. We'll get onto him in a minute. Presumably by the time this podcast airs, we'll know if it has come home or not. The football, that is. Not that anyone in Scotland gives two hoots, and quite rightly. Anyway, before I get myself embroiled in a conversation about Scottish independence, which I can't fully back up with stats, let's move on to talking about today's brilliant podcast guest. It's the musician, teacher, and my former comedy partner, Tom Davies. Tom studied music at the University of Sheffield and regularly performs music with classical groups and bands in and around the city. In this podcast episode, he talks about that, as well as growing up in Stoke on Trent, identifying traits in his family that he sees in himself, surviving the Edinburgh Fringe with me. There's a really brilliant anecdote about the TV presenter and actor Matthew Kelly. Talks a little bit about teaching, and of course we get on to chatting about X-Files Season 2, Episode 3, Blood, in which Mulder and Scully investigate a series of killings in a town in Pennsylvania where all the suspects appear to be compelled to murder after seeing violent messages on electronic devices. Really enjoyed the episode. Really enjoyed catching up with Tom again. I love how his mind works, and very sadly, despite living in Sheffield for 4 years recently, we only managed to meet up twice in that time. Such is the modern world. But we've got him for an hour here, and it is a joy. As always, if you like the podcast, please do leave me a message, subscribe and review. Follow us on X and Instagram and YouTube. Anyway, looks like there's a clean-up needed on aisle 5. Here's Tom.
Show you what I prepared as a little joke for you. I was assuming you will watch the video.
Yeah, so he'll steal your podcasts. Love it. So Tom just flickered up some subliminal messages.
Yeah, well, I thought you were going to be looking at my face. It's all right. It's fine. That's why I was late, by the way. Honestly, I'll give it a couple of minutes. I was preparing that.
Worth it. I mean, how are you? First off,
myself. Well, I'm having a. The reason I'm free in the middle of the day is my employer has given us all a well-being day, which is very modern, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm a teacher now, so we're having an inset day, which is also a well-being day.
That's nice of them.
So that's good.
Yeah, I like it when they do that. It's like we'll bring out some pizza on a Friday and just not pay people anymore. No,
they just said, oh, we're having a training day, but do whatever you want. But for me, I thought, one of my kids is off as well, so I've been with him. I farmed him off for this 2-hour period, so I'm great now. How am I in general? How's your mental health? That's a modern question, isn't it? Am I talking really loud, by the way?
No, it's all good. So what are you music?
Yeah, I'm a full-on music teacher now. So I know you're going to ask about creativity. Well, I spend most of my time now trying to get other people to be creative and teach other people how to do that. Yeah, so you're catching me at an interesting time. I mean, I guess I'm in I think a constructive period of turmoil, I would call it, in flux.
Right.
I'm one of the many 40-odd-year-old people these days who's discovering I've always had ADHD. I'm one of these new ADHD people.
Right.
It's been great, but very disruptive because you spend a lot of your time thinking about why you're doing stuff and why you used to do stuff, and you have a good 2 weeks of sort of elation. Oh, this explains everything. Then you have another 2 weeks of, oh, this explains everything. This is why everything's been bad for ages. And then you go through however long of sort of self-examination, and which is good in the long run, but it's tiring. It's sort of tiring having being your own therapist. I guess that's why people go to therapy.
Yeah. And when did that? So is that a recent thing you've just discovered? And what sort of kicked off you thinking, I'm going to go and get, my head checked out, for want of a better phrase?
Well, I think for a lot of parents, especially, it's sort of seeing it in your own kids, reading about it, and thinking, oh right, and also, when you have kids, your energy levels drop, and everything that's under the surface comes out. When you're at your weakest.
Yeah. And what? So has your kid been diagnosed with it as well?
No, it takes ages, and we're still sort of thinking through that. But also, so I'm one of 4 children, youngest of 4 children. All of my siblings are now on the diagnosis pathway. One of my brothers, who's a therapist, is ahead of us, obviously.
Right.
My mum almost certainly has it. My dad almost certainly had it. And yeah, it's one of those things. I don't know what your house was like when you were growing up, but ours was always the crazy house. Everyone was saying, your house is mad. Your house is crazy.
Yeah, right.
And little did they know that they were using hate speech. I should probably go back. Our house was crazy. It wasn't fair of them to say it.
Yeah. So it's I mean, my knowledge of mental health. I say I talk about it a lot, but my actual knowledge of it is fairly limited. Is that so? Is it genetic then? Is it something that Is it right?
Yeah, it's fully genetic, but it's one of those that's genetic, but it needs to be triggered. So you could have it in your genes, but it would never happen if you had perfectly well balanced, happy, normal childhood. It's sort of triggered by, they say, trauma, but that could include just having parents who are in their 20s and also have ADHD. So I mean, like every parent's traumatized, aren't they, when they've got young kids?
Yeah, and I guess 20s. That was because my mum had me when she was like 21. I guess that wasn't so unusual.
Well, I'm the youngest, so by the time they had me, they had 4 kids, and they were still in their 20s, just about.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah, it's been interesting. I think when we're talking about creativity as well, which I think we're going to, I realise that when I'm teaching other kids who are neurodivergent how to be creative, I'm realising myself, oh right, I've been doing it wrong. Because a lot of what I teach is music composition, and quite a lot of people start with a blank page, and that's awful, isn't it? Can you create from a blank page?
No, it's harrowing, isn't it? Just staring at that and trying to come up with something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do you deal with that on a day-to-day basis then, ADHD, and how do you deal with it when you see kids, you think might have it?
I mean, the way I'm learning to deal with it is, it sounds so basic, and that stuff, you often think, oh, I'm discovering stuff that other people have been doing for ages, like just writing things down that you have to do. Yeah. The fortunate thing with ADHD is that, the vast majority of people who take medication for it, it is effective. And it doesn't cure you. It's not going to cure you, but the medication can help. But also just learning about it, learning how to sort of hack the broken parts of your brain to actually to be relatively normal. So I mean, just like writing things down when I need to do them. It sounds obvious. So that's been like a big thing. And the other thing is just cutting yourself a bit of slack, because when I do things that I've always done, at least I've got this sort of, oh, I'm doing this because of that. Oh, it's not because I'm a fool. It helps with the self-esteem having that label. I think whether you get treatment or not, it's just, oh, I'm doing this because of that. Doesn't let you off the hook. Obviously, you still have to be you still have to, I still have a family and a job and all the rest of it. That's the other thing. I mean, staying in a job. Everybody with ADHD has some things in common. Like debt, for example, moving employment every so often, being impulsive, all these things. And now I'd like to stay in a job for a while. I'm having to sort of be out with it and tell my colleagues and I'm going full sunflower when I get my diagnosis, Chris.
Yeah. And what was the route into like teaching for? Because I know you were masseuse for a bit. Is that right?
I was a massage therapist, Chris. Masseuse is a charged term. Oh my God.
Is it?
Also, I think masseuse is a female. Masseur. I would have been a masseur. So if we're talking career, I'm going to have to get my spreadsheet up because another ADHD thing is the past. The past is a. I was out with some friends yesterday, and they were telling me, they were thanking me for a bit of driving I did for them about 8 years ago. I drove from Cornwall, and I couldn't remember anything, any detail about it at all. So I've got a little spreadsheet that says work, and I can see from here I've changed job every 2 or 3, every year and a half, which for somebody with ADHD is not that bad, actually. How did I get into teaching? Well, I've just had parents who were. Well, my mum was always a teacher.
Right.
It seemed like a good job. It's not good for non-neurotypical people because your head is battered every day by chaos.
Yeah.
And I thought that I was good at dealing with chaos, but it turns out can affect you quite badly. So I mean, the school I'm at now is great, and I think I could stay. If I can't hack it at this school, I can't hack it. So that didn't answer your question, did it? How did I get into teaching? Just momentum.
Yeah.
Momentum. But I do love teaching. I do love teaching. I don't always love being a teacher, but I do love teaching, and it's getting the balance of all of those things. Put your energies where it's needed.
And do you find performing? You still get a chance to perform music a lot, and how does that affect your ADHD? Has that always been something you've gone to and found sort of quiet and focusing?
No, I mean, so people who'll know me in Sheffield where I live, in the sort of the classical music scene, which is what I'm moving. One thing they'll tell you about me is that I play lots of instruments.
Right. Yeah.
Not like your uncle who plays guitar and a bit of bass and drums. He's mad, him. He plays lots of instruments. I mean, I feel like I can rock up at an orchestra gig on a variety of not very closely related orchestral instruments. I play all the string instruments. That's your violins, your violas, your cellos, your double basses.
Yeah.
I play a few brass instruments, percussion. I can wing it. Now, people say that to me as if that's a strength. They say, "Oh, you play loads of instruments. That must be amazing. You can play." But nowadays, I see that as like a symptom of not being able to choose, not being able to settle, and that's always been the case. And I can do a few weeks of something, and then I want to move on, and that's that for me anyway. It's a very ADHD thing. Not being able to, as soon as something gets boring, it's like it becomes painfully difficult to carry on.
Yeah, I would say you're incredibly high standard at each and every one of those instruments, though. It's not like you're just rocking up at a rock night, down a local pub.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the term sight reading as a musician?
I am, yes.
Yeah, so being able to have some new music put in front of you and to perform it. And quite a few musicians I know will tell you that's their one merchantable talent, being able to turn up and sight read. And that's my only skill as a musician, and I feel like I'm doing that with life often. And I think again that's I feel like I'm always turning up and seeing things for the first time, even if they're things I go to every day.
Yeah,
just responding in the moment always. I mean, maybe I'm going over the top there, but that's what life feels like sometimes. That you're constantly sight reading life.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things from that is, one, you sent me a text recently, and this is what sparked this chat off, because I thought, great to speak to Tom, about your brother having a birthday and him wanting to get a load of musicians together in a room. And I don't know what the concept of the night is, but I mean, I don't live in Sheffield anymore, so it would have been difficult for me to get there. I live in Edinburgh now, but that idea absolutely terrified me, coming down having no idea, and I'm not I've played in punk bands. That's my kind of level of musicianship. And then another memory, I've got a really strong memory of coming around to your flat when we were both at university together, and you just standing there playing some Bartok on the violin, and just like sight reading it, and I just thought, what a magic! It was magic watching it.
Right.
So that's like an indelible memory I have of you, and as someone who, I guess like you say, can just go in and pick up something like that, and I always thought that was really just an exciting thing to be able to do.
That's the thing that people always say that's a great thing to me, but I'm jealous of the people who can master one instrument or who can have a really high skill level on one instrument because they can focus on the boring parts of being a magician, which is that. But I wouldn't. I've been thinking recently if I could press a button and have deleted it when I was a child, the ADHD genes or whatever. I obviously wouldn't because I am where I am. But I probably would for future generations. I would press the button if it destroyed it for future generations. Maybe, depending on what day it is.
So, your mum and dad, did they just encourage you? Have you always been a sort of naturally talented musician, and have you always just been drawn to it? And was there always music in the house? You said your mum's a teacher, but
yeah, it's always a very very musical house. I mean, my hot take, controversial opinion, which I hold mainly for professional reasons, is that I don't really believe in talent. That's my hot take that I always say to kids and people. I think that's
right.
I think talent, when thinking about talent, can always be it always sounds like a bit of a crutch or a let off. Oh, they're so talented. I don't really know what it means. I mean, it's debatable that music can be a genetic thing. I don't know. So my hot take is that talent is. You often find with people that seem talented, obviously they put in all the work and they've got musical parents or they've got parents that were just into that sort of thing. So, but music was always around, always in the house. Lots of different styles of music, but no pressure was necessarily put on me to play any particular instrument.
Yeah.
I would say my dad was the more academically excellent musician, but he was a terrible teacher. He would make us cry if he tried to teach us anything because he couldn't communicate at all, really. But he couldn't communicate what was going on in his head, which I understand now. It's as you're hearing now. It's his brain would have been just spinning. He was very very intelligent. He had ADHD, as we now think, and also he had a difficult 60s. There was definitely some lasting LSD related damage. I would have thought, getting on, segueing nicely to the X-Files maybe later on. But
yeah. That's always in the back of your mind.
And
where was that? So was that? Am I right in thinking that Stoke-on-Trent? Where you're from?
Stoke-on-Trent, Doc. Yes, I can put on the accent if you want. It's a very difficult accent.
Do you know what? You're so much more Sheffield in your accent than I remember you being, and I don't know what your accent was before, but it's deep. I don't know his age, but it's deep. Your voice is deep, and it's a lovely accent. Don't get me wrong, but it's really pronounceable as like, oh, Tom's got Sheffield accent now.
I never had a Stoke accent when I was in Stoke because most of my friends were either not from Stoke. My parents aren't from Stoke,
right.
And these days, I have to say my accent's pretty flexible. Some kids in some of the schools I've taught in Sheffield say I'm really posh, which is laughable, and my accent's flexible depending who I'm talking to. Obviously, talking to a local tradesman, my accent can become more Sheffield. Talking to classical musicians who are not from Sheffield, it changes again. I think that's fair enough. Again,
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, because about Gillian Anderson, she has a bi accent, doesn't she? She has an English and an American accent, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you hear her doing her English accent, it's it's uncanny, isn't it? Strange.
Yeah.
So how did they end up in Stoke-on-Trent then? Are they from? They're not from there originally.
They're from Manchester,
right.
And they just moved to Stoke for work. I think my dad got a dad job somewhere.
Yeah. Are they still there now then?
My dad's dead, but my mum is in Stoke.
Oh yeah, the old dead. Oh, we didn't. When did that? Is that recent?
3 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not on my spreadsheet actually, so I should put it on there.
Yeah, that's on. I mean, this is the place for dead dad chat, as you know.
Hey. Do people that know our history? Have we explained this?
No, I mean, what I do is I do a bit of an intro at the beginning, and I'll talk about who you are and how we know each other. But do you know what? I just Googled because I thought, be interested to know when we did the French double act.
I can tell you, it's on a spreadsheet, mate. It's right in the middle of two relatively well-paid IT jobs. The second one, less well-paid, obviously. It was August 2007, of course.
Yes, because I've just Googled something called Comedy CV. And, I don't know who, maybe I wrote this. The 2007 Edinburgh Fringe show, Wormholes and Arseholes, has been described as Mulholland Drive, narrated by Derek and Clive. And touches on everything from feudal etiquette to humanist views on chess, eclectic, eccentric, erudite, on a mission to raise eyebrows both low and high throughout the UK. And then there's a quote here from the Sheffield Star that says, like Henderson's relish their favourite tipple, the French are dark, northern and have a very unusual taste. Now, I think I wrote that and just credited it to the Sheffield Star, so that is a real...
Oh, really?
That's like thrown out of the NUJ vibe, I think.
Wow.
But then there is another quote after this, like, are they anti-joke? Are they a concept act? They're funny, that's all that matters. And then I'll send you the link to it. I don't read the entire thing out, but no, that's sort of... I mean, what do you think about when you think about that time? Because I know you... I remember like checking in with you after like a year after we'd done that show in Edinburgh, and you were like, "Oh, I had a full-on breakdown," and I was like, "Right,
yeah."
Did you?
I mean,
I don't know if that was a joke or not.
It was. Did I say I had a breakdown during Edinburgh?
I think it was afterwards, and I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, it going from an office job, like a really dull IT job, which I should never have been doing. I should never be doing jobs like that. To doing Edinburgh. Doing a show a night, writing it. I mean, I would say writing it was definitely the highlight. And that takes us back to. Sorry, I'm going off task here, but off piste. But like we said, I remember when we wrote it, we used to sit around talking, and we recorded everything we said, and then the actual writing came after the fact, and that's probably the best creative experience I've had, the most fulfilling and the most natural way of being creative I can think of. And then I enjoyed editing on the paper, and the backward and forward we had from that. But that first creative thing being in the correct medium, like trying to make each other laugh. When you're trying to do a comedy show, that's just obvious now that you should be talking it first. Unless it's really high concept, which we had to write, but which, let's remind ourselves, Chris, it wasn't high concept. we thought it was, yeah, but it wasn't. So I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed performing to a certain extent. Yeah, I did. I enjoyed the performance of it. It was a great month. I really glad we did it. But then going from that back to the office, to an office job, was problematic, obviously. The low light for me was, for various reasons, during August 2007, I ended up with Matthew Kelly's phone number.
Yes.
Because what's his name? Mark
Watson. Yeah.
Mark Watson tasked me, you, and who's the bird guy who's now quite famous?
Bird guy.
He's on Taskmaster.
Bird guy.
Who are the Taskmaster people? Who isn't the tall teacher guy?
Oh, with the band.
This is really embarrassing.
Alex Horn.
Alex Horn.
Right.
Wasn't it me and Alex Horn? And were you there? I can't remember. Walking through Edinburgh to try and ambush Matthew Kelly.
Yes.
To get him to go to Mark Watson's 24-hour thing. Because they always will try and get a celebrity, and we managed to get the celebrity. Anyway, for various reasons, Matthew Kelly gave me his phone number so I could get him to this thing.
Yeah,
which was weird enough in itself. I remember Mark Watson said I look like Boris Johnson, which at the time was just funny. He's comparing me to just a risible buffoon. That backfired. Anyway, and then a few months later, I was just sitting in my office doing some just basically data entry. Just living the low life, and I get a missed call on my phone from Matt K, as he was on my phone.
Oh, really? Shit.
Yeah, so he So Matt Kay was like, oh wow, okay. And I answered it at my desk. And Matthew Kelly answers, Tom, how are you doing? How are you doing? Lovely to hear your voice again. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it became really clear really quickly that he was ringing a different Tom on his phone.
Oh, gutted.
And then, obviously, I didn't think that he had fond memories of it.
I don't know. You could have had a lovely moment.
No, I don't think we had a lovely moment. And then we just sort of signed off, okay, bye. And then I just hung up, and my colleagues sort of looked at me a little bit. And then I just turned to them and said, that was Matthew Kelly. And they didn't react at all, which is the correct response to your colleague.
Yeah.
Obviously, falsely claiming to have just spoken to Matthew Kelly, or your colleague even correctly saying they've just spoken to Matthew Kelly. It's not worth talking. And that was just the pits. Nothing to do with Matthew Kelly. It was just that little sparkle of showbiz in my dreary IT job. Soon after that, I got out of that. Actually, looking at my spreadsheet, that's not true. 2 years after that, I got out of IT. After a long period of depression. Well, not long. All periods of depression are long, aren't they? But so that's probably when you were checking in at me. You were probably checking in on me between the Matthew Kelly incident, deep in the doldrums, and then before getting into teaching. Yeah, he was quite drunk and sweary as well, wasn't he? I hadn't experienced a daytime TV man being that sweary.
Yeah, I remember that, and everybody walking in and there being like a rallying cry of someone said, "Who's Matthew Kelly?" And then Mark once said, "Who isn't Matthew Kelly?" And then that became like the big thing. And Matthew Kelly walked on stage in front of about 200 people, bemused. And everybody was saying, "Who isn't Matthew Kelly?"
What's your memory of Edinburgh? What's your takeaway from our Edinburgh experience? Have you been back? Have you been back as a performer?
Yes. Well, I did. Well, I live here now, and I work as arts publicist. So, and I work on comedy shows and theatre shows and for the film festival. So, it was initially odd walking around all those streets where we sat outside on the Royal Mile playing chess, trying to get people to get tickets off us and flyer in. So that was all odd, but it's almost like I compartmentalised it in my brain. That was like a different Edinburgh. That's not like this Edinburgh. But I have been, because I did a couple of shows on my own as a stand-up. But I look back at it really fondly, actually, because it was like we made so many, in hindsight, errors, but in a good way. It's like, it's like you'd never. It's just I didn't ask anybody. I was like, again, it's like how I've approached everything in life, like this podcast. It's like I'll just do it and then figure out how to do it. And again, like being in bands like punk bands, it's like you just learn how to do it as you go on. I'd never really sat down, talked to anybody. I thought maybe it's just total arrogance on my part that I thought I could just do it.
No, I think that's a really good combination, and that's something I thought about a lot as a musician and everything else. That you are definitely one of those people who will have an idea and then just commit to it and do it. Whereas I'm somebody who will have the ideas and would never do it from fear of failure mostly, but also that's a good combination of people to have, and you get that in music, in classical music. Especially, you have your inside players and you have your outside players. So, in a string quartet, for example, you have your first violin and your cello, and they are the outside players. They're taking the lead. And then the inside players are the supporting musicians. So, string quartet's a great dynamic. This is relevant, Chris. I'm going to bring it.
No, it's great. This is great. Yeah.
So I'm definitely an inside player, and I've embraced that. But you even have your first violin and your second violin. They're playing the same instrument, but they're completely different roles and completely different mindsets. And you do need some people in creative endeavours who will just absolutely go for it and put themselves on the line like that. And you need some people who are, supportive players. And when I'm playing the bass, for example, that's the ultimate supporting role. There's no accolades for that, but I really enjoyed my ideal job during that. What I enjoyed most was writing, and then when we were at Edinburgh, we sort of made a few friends that year of people whose shows we went to, and we got friendly. In my head, I was constantly writing material for them, And I'd love to be one of those jobbing sort of writers who just write sketches for various people, and then just let it go. I was never really into performing on stage because unless I could do like the David Kahn role of the straight man, just being an adult on stage when people are being ridiculous around them. I remember we bumped into each other in the office we were working at, and we knew each other at university. We were sort of in the same halls, weren't we?
Yeah.
And I think we had a conversation. I can't remember it now, and obviously memory is really just fallible anyway. But we sort of said, we should write some comedy together. I don't know why you brought it. You maybe were already thinking of it, and I was like, we should definitely do that. Meaning, obviously, that's a funny idea. Now on to the next thing we're talking about. Whereas then you came back to me. If in my memory you came back to me a couple of days later. I've booked us at Edinburgh. That's obviously not true. That's not true. But in my mind, that's what happened. We had a what I thought was a light-hearted conversation, and then you fully committed to it. And I love being dragged along with other people's commitment. When people ask me to do creative things, what I love, Chris, is desperation. I love people saying we need somebody for this.
Yeah.
And that's how I was cured of stage fright as well. Because as a kid, I had crippling stage fright.
Right.
When I came to university, a couple of things happened. A couple of concerts that wouldn't have happened. So a friend of mine wrote an opera, and there was an unplayable violin part, for example, and everybody turned it down because it was too difficult to play correctly. And it basically got to the point where this wouldn't happen unless somebody stepped up and did a job. And also the composer said, but we're desperate, can you play it, otherwise it's not happening. That's the most freeing creative space to be in. I'm asking you to do this, and if you don't do it, it just won't happen.
Yeah.
And do your best, and your best is the best. Your best is what I'm asking for, so that this can happen. And that's really liberating. That's what I'm looking for. Much more difficult is having my own idea and trying to convince other people that it's worth committing to.
Yeah.
That's tricky.
And we wrote the entire thing on, most of it on messages, didn't we? We were both working for a bank in Sheffield in the office.
That was it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right. I've forgotten that whole element of it completely.
Yeah, because I wasn't. I think you were higher up the pecking order at HSBC Bank than I was, and you G-chatted me on the internal messaging service or whatever messages, and you said, I can give you the power of G-chat. Do you want it? And I went, yes. And then we went back and forward and basically wrote an entire Edinburgh show on G-chat. And I remember covertly going over to the photocopier and photocopying, scanning, printing out 50 pages of G-chat messages, and that was the show. And then Elaine in the office came over and was like, "Are you using G-chat there? You're not allowed to do that." And I was like, "Oh, it just popped up, it just popped up." But I think maybe that was a period because I was definitely working there when my dad died, and it was like, what am I going to do? What thing am I going to do to sort of channel whatever this is? I don't even, obviously tragic sequence of events, but it wasn't like I wasn't having like an existential moment, and I wasn't feeling, I was obviously processing grief in some kind of way, but there was definitely like, I need to do something with this, and that just, I don't know where it came from, just an idea of, I didn't even know I don't know where the idea of Edinburgh came from. It was like, I think it was maybe, there was nowhere in Sheffield to do comedy at the time, and I'm sure there is, or there was, the Les Car, what have you. But it just seemed, it's like easier to book a venue at the Edinburgh Fringe with no previous comedy experience at all than go and do like 5 minutes down the pub. I
think also it helped that through my older brother who was in Sheffield before me, and my sister, who's older than me as well, they were friends with quite a lot of the fine art, the artists scene, and they knew Kim Noble and Stuart Silver of Noble and Silver, i.e. Perrier Award winners. So, and I'd met them, and I'd been to see their shows, and that just ticked all my boxes because they were like the other side of Jam and brass eye. They weren't like that, but in terms of how dark their material was and how interesting it was and how arty it was, and also I'd met them, and they were I think I'd stayed at their house once in London when they were doing a show, and they were normal people who were from or in the city I was in, and they'd won this award, and I think they were on TV, or they were around and about, all that sort of thing. So it seemed normal that you could be creative and just go and do Edinburgh. So that was a big inspiration.
Yes.
Knowing some people who'd done it already.
Yeah, I do remember that. I'd go to see their show in Soho Theatre, and that being quite a big deal. Because they were the sort of people who would do, a 5-minute bit down Monkey Business in Kentish Town, were they? They just
no. That's a good point. That sort of stuff you couldn't do open mic, could you? For that.
No. Was there any part of you that thought when you came back that you'd want to carry on doing it, either like as part of a double act, or you want to do it on your own, or was it always like, I've enjoyed the writing, I don't really, because I said this before on another previous podcast, I always thought it's the most immediate way of communicating an idea is doing stand-up. You could write it in the afternoon, then go up and tell it to an audience. I suppose it's in the same way music. You could write a song and then play it that night if you wanted to.
I think it is different, and a good friend of mine who you should definitely get on is a composer who was a classical composer. It's the same guy who wrote this opera that was very difficult. And when you write a piece of classical music, especially, it's a huge amount of work undertaking, especially writing for an orchestra or something like that. Months and months and months of work, which ends up being 10 minutes of art that comes out the other end. And he now basically spends all of his time doing pottery. He which to me sounds like the exact opposite of that you do. I'm not an expert at pottery, but you just splat some clay on a thing, don't you, and then put it in the oven, and then it's art, then you get a bit of art forever, right? Or it lasts. It will be found in thousands of years. It seems like the exact opposite creative process. You do a bit, and then it's there forever.
My partner's a ceramicist, so
did I get it right then? Yeah,
that's pretty much it. Yeah,
I think she'll confirm that that's correct, right? But you know what I mean. It's the opposite. It's the opposite thing. And stand-up seemed like the pottery. It's the pottery end of that balance of creativity to product, if you know what I mean.
I mean, let's just talk about Sheffield a little bit, and then we can move on to X-Files stuff.
Sheffield.
Yeah. So, what is it? What keeps you there, and what do you like about the place? And I feel like I've been exiled from Sheffield now, because when I said I was moving away, I really got a kind of why from
Bruce Savasi from your parent. yeah. I mean, it's tricky because a lot of people will tell you it's the Goldilocks city. Now, let's just be clear here that when I'm waxing lyrical about Sheffield, I'm talking about the areas of Sheffield that I live in. Sheffield's a massively divided city, so like the life expectancy in the north of Sheffield is about 15 years less than the rest of it. Don't quote me on that. And I have worked in those areas of Sheffield, so obviously people looking outside in, there are, like most cities, areas that are completely different. But the leafy south side of Sheffield, the middle class areas that I know and love, are great. It feels to me like the Goldilocks city, and also a sort of a do-it-yourself city in terms of creativity. For example, I'm into classical music. It's by far the biggest city in Europe that doesn't have a professional orchestra. I mean, by far. I mean, I actually looked at all the data, and second place is some place in Belarus, and it's weird. It's an anomaly because places like Leeds have got 2. Manchester's got about 5, but Sheffield none. Which is great for me as a mostly not professional musician, because that means that the amateur scene is massive. There's about 5 or 6 good to half decent amateur orchestras that I'm involved in. Yeah. And it means you can get involved more easily, and it's like that a lot with the other sort of musical scenes, as far as I know. It's also very leafy, famously nice. The houses are not too expensive compared to other places. You know, it's a place to live. It's a place to live, but yes, it doesn't have the structural, creative things. It has enough that you could go out and see stuff, and I'm trying to do that more. I'm trying to re-engage with Sheffield a bit. Go to all the gallery openings. There's loads of art going on. Yeah. It's a very creative city. I think it has a massive percentage of people working in creative arts. I think it's 20% compared to the average of like 5%. So I'm sounding like a bit of a tourist information board, aren't I?
Yes, you and John Cooper Clarke this week with his Sheffield poem really got me. Yeah, you should listen to that on Lauren Laverne's Six Music show. It's great. Brought a tear to my eye. When I said we're going to be watching season 2, episode 3, Blood, you said yes, that's my top 3. And I was like, wow, really? So let's hear about that.
When you asked me to do this, I was thinking, oh, X-Files, yeah, right. So, brilliant. And I was going through the Rolodeck in my head of like, oh, which are the ones I'd love to get. Obviously, the Eugene Coombs. That's quite early, isn't it? It's quite stretchy man.
Yeah, season 1. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big one. And then I remember the one I watched quite recently. I love the early seasons of the X-Files. I used to watch it religiously when it was back. I had to check. It was 95, wasn't it? It started airing, so I was 11. That would have been right in the sweet spot.
Yeah, I think this one was 95. It started 93, 94, but yeah.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. And I think I got tired of the arcs. I was definitely Monster a Day fan, and I still am a Monster a Day fan. I think for most things I watch, I can't think of many things where the arc is the thing I go back to.
Yeah,
maybe things like The Wire, which isn't very episodic really in a way, but things that should be episodic that start developing an arc, I think I have problems with. I think it helps that I was a big Star Trek fan. I am still a big Star Trek fan, and that is
right.
But back then, when you're watching Star Trek: The Next Generation alongside things like the X-Files, every one of those Star Trek episodes are self-contained little pieces. So this episode, it burns very brightly in my brain because at least one of the reasons is your Blade Runner guy. What's his name? Sanderson.
William Sanderson.
Sanderson, who's great. I mean, I love Blade Runner anyway. It's if you ask me what my favourite film is, that's my favourite film, and he's in it. So I knew him. I would have known him then, or I'm misremembering it. But he's fantastic, and that image of the LCD screens popping up is just. It's just a strong image, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Kill.
Yeah. So I guess let's just a brief synopsis about what this episode's about. It's essentially that there's some killings going on in this town, Franklin, which is in Pennsylvania, I think. The suspects are killing people because they're seeing violent messages on electronic devices. So the episode starts with your man J.F. Sebastian from Blade Runner. He's an aging postal worker. He's working on a franking machine in a post office. Gets a paper cut, and I totally missed this whole thing that he doesn't like blood.
Yeah.
Totally missed that because the idea of the show is due to a pesticide being released, a kind of LSD type pesticide. It's creating whatever your worst fear is. It brings out the worst in you. So his worst fear is blood, but I totally missed that. But he gets a paper cut, and then he gets sacked by his boss due to cutbacks or something. And he goes back to his desk, and then the digital readout on the franking machine says "kill," and then kill them all. And he looks suitably upset. And then
But in rewatching it, knowing that was going to happen, like the first scenes are great. You have all these sort of factory shots of like the franking machine, and then just the numbers popping up, and I was thinking, when's it going to happen? And you're right, it doesn't happen till afterwards, but it's creepy enough anyway because the music's there.
Yeah.
And I guess to a Hollywood writer, the idea of working in a postal office is creepy enough that they have the creepy music just for somebody doing their job. But yes, again, it's setting the scene, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, I think, and that came from a kind of like vague idea that it's who's right with this one, Glenn Morgan, just wanted to do something about postal workers, which is a very vague reason for writing a show, and also I think he was afraid of blood himself, and there'd been this whole controversy over some horrible pesticides being sprayed in California somewhere. So there's a few things going on that kind of factored into this episode. But then, and then after the credits, then you get another incident in a lift where some businessman starts feeling claustrophobic, and then we realise that he's killed a load of people in this lift. So it's like, what's going on in this town? It's a small town. It's for once in an X-Files episode, the local sheriff is actually of help to Mulder.
Yeah, he was good,
nice.
Wasn't he? He was a nice guy. Mulder gave him the cold shoulder straight from the beginning. He was a bit aloof. But then I quite liked how Mulder warmed to him a little bit. What's wrong with right field or right back or whatever it is when they're talking about baseball? He was quite an efficient guy. And he was against the spraying, wasn't he? He was trying to help. Yeah, I do love all these quite well drawn local figures.
Yeah,
you have to wonder how, as an actor, how you breathe life into these little roles.
Exactly, and I said it before. It's like that's one of the strengths of the show is that they get good cast members, like William Sanderson, who that's quite a wild sort of narrative arc that he has to go on. And he really sort of sells it, Mulder does quite a bit of detective work in this one, which is, we don't usually do that. He just rocks up and makes some prophecy, and then that tends to come true. But
I tell you what, I picked up more watching it this time is having me and my wife got into Sex Education, the series, quite a lot, and that rekindled my love of Gillian Anderson, obviously. Because she's fantastic in that, and I was just reading about her, and then I was never really a Gillian Anderson fanboy, going back, but I'm more so now reading about her time in the X-Files, and I was sort of blown away that in the early series she just felt totally incompetent. She always thought she was going to get sacked, and then she got pregnant really early on and thought that was going to be the end. And this is obviously one of the pregnancy episodes because you never see her stood up, so she's obviously got a belly in this one.
That's right, yeah.
So she's always cutting to her sitting at a desk, or she's just doing an autopsy. She does a lot of autopsies in the second series, or just sends emails and stuff, which is fair enough.
I like how she's like revealed as well. It's like the camera sort of pans. The camera's looking at a light, and then it pans down, and like who's doing the autopsy? Of course, it's Scully. So she's still there in the background a bit. Yeah.
I love all these stories in every series I watch. I love these stories of writers having to accommodate just real life stuff. I just really like that challenge. I quite like that challenge as a writer. In theory, I don't do much writing, but it's the same in music as well. Being given a brief to a really specific thing that can be really stimulating. Like, this actor can't be seen standing anymore, or this actor's asked to leave. You have to have these trapdoor things written into in case an actor leaves.
It's a really good episode. This it's like I say, Mulder doing quite a bit of detective work. He's looking what the kind of green substance is on the killer's hands. What is that, and then that leads into this pesticide. He does his own voiceover trying to hypothesize what it is, and that was a nice line from Scully where she's listening to his hypothesis on a tape, and he eventually says might be something to do with aliens in here, and she goes, I was wondering when you're going to get to that. So like deep burn from Scully, which was nice. And then of course the second appearance from the Lone Goodman as the nerds, nice to see them, and Paul Hickey being as creepy as he was last time about Scully. That was pretty fun. And Mulder, who again we said on the podcast before that we think Duchovny probably is a bit of a sex man and likes and why not? Yeah, let's be sex positive. But he does get in a line there about men like Paul Hickey give perversion a bad name, and
he's got has he survived his time period? Has he come through unscathed? I mean, because I've not heard any Duchovny scandals.
I think he's fine. He's sort of he's writing a book and he's in a band and that sort of thing, and he's just aging. You know, it looked like he's had a bit of work done on his face, and
Yeah.
no, I think he's sort of history is judging him, you know, quite well, and he always seems to have had a. I don't know what the working relationship really was like between him and Gillian Anderson, but I think they just respected each other.
I get the impression that they did eventually. I think she had a lot of, understandably, she was in her 20s. She was playing somebody who had 2 doctorates and was Mulder's boss. And I think I've heard interviews with her. She said she was in completely over her head, trying to be authoritative when she was. She and she was constantly forgetting her lines, and also she reports it. It could be that she was brilliant and very self-critical. Who knows?
And I liked another few little bits I really liked in this is when William Sanderson's character goes into a department store and tries to get a new job. He stands in front of like a bank, a wall of TVs, right?
Yeah.
And they start flashing on, and you get like a shot of Charles Manson. You get a shot of like some police brutality. You get a shot of what I think is Waco, Texas siege and that explosion. And I liked that. I like how you kind of get little glimpses of what was actually happening in the 90s in America through a lot of this. So that was a great scene and great sort of use of music in that as well, which my cat here did not like that bit. It's like and the cat wasn't into it. So that was great work from Mark Snow on this. And of course, big shout out to actress Aisling Geer, who's in this and plays the Bonnie McRoberts, who she tries to attack Mulder after seeing like a subliminal message on a microwave.
Oh,
she was a adult actress.
Oh, that was one. I did look at the Wikipedia thing. I thought, who was she playing? I wondered whether she was the one who sort of had a flash onto one of the screens, but no, she was the mechanic killer.
That's right, yeah. So that was, and then I didn't realise, and again I looked up that as well, that she was a working porn star at the time, and she'd also been a body double in films like Basic Instinct and that, and I think there's one of the writers said, we're really progressive at the X-Files, because unlike like NYPD Blue, who I think used like a retired adult film star, in the X-Files we use a working porn actor.
Yeah.
You know, we're really liberal over here. So that was she was pretty good.
Yeah, the only thing that felt dated was when they were talking about all of the crazy phobias everyone had, and it's like blood, you know. And then did they describe her as being paranoid of rape or something? There was some phrase that stuck out. It was like, no, she. I think she was legitimately cautious around the dodgy mechanic. She's not paranoid. That's not paranoid. She was actually just quite legitimately be cautious. But that was the only thing that stuck out as being dated necessarily.
You've just reminded me actually that this would have been a prime opportunity to mention Mulder's fear of fire, which never got another look in again. Like in season 1, the episode called Fire, we learned that Mulder has got a mortal fear of fire, like the rest of us on planet Earth.
Oh, yes.
So this would have been a perfect opportunity to bring that, but I think the writers obviously totally forgot that plot line. But yeah, it does. It's great. It moves at quite a pace, this episode, and then all the way up to the climax, which takes place on this tower overlooking a town square, and obviously an allusion to that University of Texas shooting in the 60s. But that was great. Really like tense, and I mean, I'm not really sure how again Mulder put 2 and 2 together and went, I know where William Sanderson's going to be. He's obviously going to be at the blood drive.
It was very brushed towards the end, wasn't it? You can almost hear the writers looking at their watches, thinking, "We've got to pull this together." 5 minutes.
Yeah, because Mulder doesn't make a reference when he wrestles the gun off the Sanderson character and says, if you don't give me that gun, there's going to be blood everywhere. But surely if the guy's trying to kill a load of people from a tower, that's going to create a lot of blood.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well. Yeah. I was thinking, well, he might double down that. You might just be confronting it. I wondered that you're talking about the adult film actress. That if you were going to edit this film, if you're going to edit this episode again, I think sort of brutally, kill your darlings, you'd probably cut all of her stuff, right? Because it doesn't actually add anything to have her little story arc. She goes into a situation, she kills the guy, and then she's shot by the police. That's just showing something they've already said has happened a few other times. And I wonder whether they only kept that in because of the star actress, because more time on Sanderson's character, because he's the main arc. He starts it, he ends it. We don't really... I don't know, what do you think about that? I mean...
No, now you say it, I sort of agree with that, because it's one of the only episodes where it's not like at the beginning Sanderson does anything. He doesn't commit any act before the opening credits, and then it's almost a bit jarring when after the credits we end up in this lift with another character. You got, who's this? And then that character commits a murder. But I think you're right. It's like the overarching narrative is William Sanderson's character. Is fear of blood and him seeing all these messages and being forced towards ending up in a tower sniping people, and then in amongst that you've got the inciting incident, which is a guy in a lift killing people. That's what brings Mulder on.
But I'd have put her in the lift killing the guys, because that's more remarkable than quite a big office worker, having a woman who's claustrophobic in a lift, and then you find, because then you see how it works. Then you see how you get the message. They have a phobia of that. Then you've covered that, and then you've got your star actress. I just wonder what's going on in the back. How did they get her? Was that her agent ringing them? Was that a friend of David Duchovny, which seems more likely, doesn't it?
Yeah. I don't know how that sort of casting process happened.
Because when she kills the mechanic, quite a lot of that scene, you don't need LSD and subliminal messages for that. You feel threatened anyway. He's really creepy, and then he touches her, and you might lash out and kill a creepy mechanic in a really dark repair shop in the middle of the night for some reason. That's when she's going.
No, I totally agree on that. But it worked just on a purely kind of visceral level. I was like, this is quite a it's a quite creepy scene. I
forget how often the X-Files do straight horror, like that one in the creepy house with the weird family. That's terrifying. But you know what I mean? Have you done that?
Oh yeah, Home. Yeah.
No,
that's coming up. And do you think you'll watch some more now?
Well, within the last couple of years, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go back and watch the X-Files again, and I think I made it to season 3-ish until I was surprised at how soon the big arc kicked in.
Yeah.
And then I was sort of out. I'm not. I don't have the patience for that. That sort of long form arcs. Also, I'm finding these days I get scared a bit more. I don't enjoy being scared in my downtime. Weirdly, I guess that's normal, isn't it? Really? Right. I was surprised how well Holmes quite. I used to not be bothered about jump scares.
Yeah.
But I think, again, going back to how my brain works, quite often when I'm watching things these days, I'm also doing one or two other things at the same time. So I'll have it on the screen and in the side corner of my eye. So maybe that's why I'm not watching any deep, meaningful things that much these days. I'm always playing a game and watching something, or trying to burn myself out at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. Have you seen anything recently that you've liked, or you read anything you've liked, or anything that sort of excited you?
Oh my goodness! I mean, we how it is. We're in the peak low energy, high energy children. So if we ever watch anything together, the programs me and my wife watch regularly are, we try and watch University Challenge quite regularly, and we watch Naked Attraction quite regularly. And nothing in between those two things. And maybe no, not much else really. No, I'm really culturally weak at the moment.
I like that. That's
culturally weak. Most discoveries I make are music. The great thing about classical music is you can make, maybe more so than other styles of music, you can discover whole seams of stuff of people who are long dead, and just really rinse it. And I've discovered this Flemish composer from 300 years ago. I'm going to listen to everything they wrote, and you discover there's loads of other people who like it, and you're just finding whole seams of stuff, and you can get very intense into that.
Is there any particular recommendations?
God. I mean, I find that difficult because most things I just get into and then burn out and then move on and add it to my. I've recently discovered the composer Gustav Mahler, and I do recommend to anyone out there who's thinking, I'd quite like to get into classical music, but is trepidation, is to get Armando Iannucci's audiobook about his collected writings on classical music, because he refers to himself as an outsider. I mean, he's not somebody who plays music, but he absolutely loves classical music. And hearing him write about and talk about classical music has been really good for me. Hearing somebody who isn't inside it talking enthusiastically about it, and he does a whole essay about how he discovered Mahler, which is a ridiculous thing because he's been dead, a long time. But yeah, discovering something, and it's ridiculous to discover such a famous composer. But that's what your own personal journey is, especially with that sort of art. Yeah, you're just hopping around from composer to composer, period to period. And one recommendation. Okay, here's a recommendation. Seek out the album Road Trip by the Aurora Orchestra. It's a really well curated album, which you don't often get with classical music. It's a collection of modern American music. So you got some Charles Ives, some Copeland, and John Adams. Yep. Paired with some American folk songs that have been arranged, and they sort of intersperse it in the album. It's a really, really interesting album, and it's a really, really good recording of the John Adams Chamber Symphony, which is manic. It's inspired by cartoons from the 50s and 60s. And
interesting.
If you
I like
to
John Adams. Yeah, I mean, again, I like a lot of my world. It's sort of through film is how I discover things, and John Adams' music's used on a Luca Guadagnino film called I Am Love, and that was the first time I'd heard his as like Lollapalooza, that stuff. I really like that.
But on that album, there's the third movement of his chamber symphony is called Roadrunner, and it's a interpretation of both Roadrunner and the original Roadrunner music for a chamber ensemble of like classical instruments and drum kit, classical instruments, drum kit, and synthesizer all together. It is the most manic piece of music and extremely difficult. But if you ever need a bit of pep, listen to specifically that recording of the third movement of John Adams' Chamber Symphony. What I often look for in classical music, especially, is the sort of music that every time you listen to it, it's overwhelming and surprising. Now, there's some pieces of classical music, you mentioned Bartók before, like some of his string quartets, that every time I listen to them I think, whoa, this is weird. And some of them I've listened to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. But I love that dense sort of music that is constantly surprising you with new layers of detail. But yeah, that's my one recommendation, that album, and specifically,
I've made a note. Thank you. I made a note to mention the Blade Runner soundtrack when you mentioned it, because that's something I listened to. I woke up very early, about 4:00 in the morning, and I put that on, and I'd not really listened to the whole thing as a piece of music, and I was totally just blown away by that, because there's music in there that's I'd never heard in the film before. And so like immersive and otherworldly, for want of a better word, and like it's like dance at one point, and just visionary stuff, but just totally works. It's very rare I'd sit down and listen to like an album, and certainly a soundtrack album all the way through, and that
the whole sound world of that album, it just like from the first bit, it's like I feel like when I listen to it puts like a really comforting pressure on me, like one of those really heavy blankets you can get. The whole sound world is like it really covers you, doesn't it? It's like maybe it's just because I love the film as well, but I feel Blade Runner's fascinating. It's my favourite film. I don't think I always enjoy it when I watch it, because it's a bit of work involved in watching that film, because it's. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like it's a Sunday film. I can only really watch it on a Sunday. And sort of you just disappear into the sofa and the world of it.
Believe Me is written and edited by me, Chris Boyd, with production support from Steve Marshall. The music is by Johnny Boyle, and our logo is by Russ Brown. If you like the show, please do hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you out there next time.